Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Tea with Taylor. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk about environmental injustice. And I'll explain what that means a little bit later, but it is very relevant in our current society, and I felt that it is important to talk about. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of facts and stats about it, of course, and let you know why, in fact, environmental injustice is so relevant. Um, Thank you again so much for joining me, guys, here. It's been a long month, a long Pride month, happy Pride and all that. It's been pleasantly exhausting. Can't wait for this month to be over. But really, happy that I've been able to do so much in such a short period of time. Um, Along those lines, just before we get started, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that there is going to be on the 26th, I'm going to be at the BLM Pride Parade. BLM of Rhode Island is, I believe, one of the hosts of that helped plan that. And so I'll be there, and it's also a fundraiser event. Senator Tiara Mag, my good friend Dion will be speaking. So if you are in the area, come and join us for that. Check out my socials, Progress Channel socials, and you'll see the flyer for that, the BLM Pride Parade, and you can join us and have a little fun, while also getting a little education. And then June 28th, which I believe is Monday, is going to be the very first Woonsocket Pride celebration. So that's a big deal. That's something that you can write home about, I'm sure. I'm hearing a lot of different things about that. There's been some speed bumps, as always. There's resistance where there's change. So yeah, if you are around and you want to come to Woonsocket and help us celebrate Pride with Woonsocket, their very first one on the anniversary of the Stonewall riot as well. And if you feel ever so inclined, feel free to join us for that too. It should be quite the ride. I'm sure, I believe the Parker Channel or someone will be hosting that live. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure, but that's usually the case. So we shall see. Um, but that's what my weekend's looking like. So yeah, it'll be fun. Um, Jump right into hot topics, though. I'm like, give you guys a few minutes to join in with me. But I'm going to jump right into hot topics. I have a lot of them because last week's episode I didn't get to share as many as I wanted to because there was just so much to talk about, and I had a panel of three amazing people who all like to talk, and who all are very great people in their own respect, but also like to talk, which is fine, which is great. I love that. So yeah, there were a few that I didn't get to talk about last week that actually really were really interested in sharing with you guys and hearing back about what you think about these things. Um, One being Victoria's Secret. We all know the brand Victoria's Secret. It's no secret that the company has been struggling in the past few years to stay afloat. And with that, they had some sort of scandal with, I believe, within the Me Too era that involved their CEO, and so they now have a new CEO. And this new CEO is installing some changes in the company as a whole and the Victoria's Secret brand. And what they did recently is they are bringing back their fashion shows, which is something we're going to talk about soon on Tea with Taylor and the future of that. But Victoria's Secret normally is known for their Angels campaign. And so they mixed the Angels campaign and they hired a bunch of different women, trans women, brown women, a heavier set body type women, and are changing the sizes in the store as well to represent that. I think it's a very good change to make. I'm really glad that they're finally getting with the times, and that's exactly what other companies are saying. They're just saying that with this new move, it's kind of showing that Victoria's Secret's weakness and how they should have done this a long time ago. And so we shall see how this works for the Victoria's Secret brand. for y'all there who like Victoria's Secret, I'm sure you'll find out if some stores close or dramatic measures will be taken. They can't meet their status quo, so to speak. Another thing that really kind of shook me a little bit was Papa Biden, President Biden, meeting with Putin last week, and yeah, it was I don't know, it kind of felt like it was a big deal to me. It was like looming in the air, and there's a lot that goes into that meeting. And I feel like he had to make it clear that where he stands with Russia and Putin very early on in his campaign, which I'm not mad at, but I feel like he had to do that in order to differentiate himself from the last uh, president, who shall go unnamed. But yeah, I feel like he had to set that barrier pretty early on and let it be known where he stands with that, because there has been a lot of different aspects to that there, on both ends, with involvement there where there should not have been. There was, things like the cyber attacks recently that were to be talked about. Um, there's the climate, which is something we're going to get into. The Syria Ukraine situation, detained prisoners, I believe some U.S. prisoners as well. So there's a lot. It's high stakes, and I'm sure very rising tension between the two. And that I haven't actually kept up with it this week, so I'm not sure how that meeting went. But let me tell you, it looked very tense between the two of them. They didn't even they, let alone to see them sitting 6 feet apart. Whatever, that's becoming normal. We see that a lot in television now, but they just seem like they were very uninterested in one another. I even saw a meme that was floating around for a while, a few memes that were floating around for a while that were like talking about the two of them and their relationship and how they were just like, eh. But yeah, again, I feel like the team made a decision that they needed to do that early on so that the Americans know where they stand with Russia. So I want to see more. I want to hear more. I wish I could be a fly on the wall for that meeting. And if you guys did actually see that, or if you caught that when it was happening, please let me know how it was in the comment section. Was it a debate? Was it like what happened there? I need to know. I'm gonna YouTube it as soon as we're done here, because I feel like it's been silent, or has the meeting not happened yet? I don't know. You guys let me know, because I'm interested. Last week I was like, no way, like the Terminator. Anyways, moving forward, and with another issue that is actually happening right now. It's been a very big topic that a lot of people are talking about. It's what we're calling the workforce shortage. And in a lot of different industries, like the restaurant industry, with there's been a lack of employers, employees. Sorry, that's the first time. And people, not positions not being filled because of lack of interest, I want to say. And what I believe is actually happening is that COVID exposed has the weakness in a lot of different industries, and a lot of different people are deciding that they want to do something else, or they're going to go, look for something else to do that was more fitting. And I was in that boat, so I can understand that. But the National Restaurant Association has commented on it, and it is a huge loss in that industry, among others, where people are, they're calling it the resignation boom, is what I heard on ABC, where a lot of people, even that have been working from home or haven't been able to work from home, are putting in their 2 weeks or their resignation, or actually preferring to work from home, or work out some sort of a plan where they work from home mostly and go to the office like once or twice a week. So that's been the preference that's been set now. The workplace and what that looks like has changed drastically over the past year. And you know what? I agree with it 100%. And understand what this resignation boom is. And then on the other token of that, you also have to realize, and 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 this is something that I'm actually just realizing myself, that with this pandemic and with COVID, we lost like millions of people. So it's not something that is light. It's not that we're just don't have people to fill these positions, because that is actually the case, or people don't want to fill the positions, which is actually the case. It is also that we lost millions of people over this past year due to the COVID-19 virus. So it's not just one thing; it's all of the things. And when you think about it on that side, it's a little scary, but it is true. This is the world we're living in now. Unfortunately, we did lose those people. Uh, so, like I said before, 87% of people prefer to work from home. So this is something that's huge. It's really big. And if you know anyone that works from home or has that opportunity, or someone in that same boat who's like, what, it's time for a change, it's time for something, then keep up with it, because this is I feel like this is the future of the workforce. Um, and that's something else that needs to be changed. So I actually am looking forward to it. um, Something cute that I saw, and something not so cute that I'll share right after this, was a little story. And I don't know if you guys follow, or if anyone watches the Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith and Willow Smith. And I believe Jada Pinkett Smith's mother, I can't think of her name. If you guys know it, let me know in the comments. But yeah, they have their talk show called Red Table Talk. And recently, Willow Smith had um, Paris Jackson on to speak with about, you know, growing up in the spotlight. And I thought it was so well spoken, so well done, and so heartfelt. I really enjoyed. I only saw most. I saw most of it, but I only saw it in part. Um, and I thought it was a really good conversation. I am a fan of the show, The Red Table Talk, and I don't get to catch it very often because it's a Facebook show. But yeah, they speak on another level. I really enjoy what they do. Um, but it was really interesting to me that Willow Smith and Paris Jackson had so many similarities. And it's no big secret in the industry that, I was just talking about this with a friend the other day, that growing up in the spotlight causes a lot of problems. They were talking about paranoia and, different mental illnesses that develop or could develop from growing up in the spotlight. We've seen so many different examples of celebrities from childhood growing up. And I was just talking about this with someone, I can't even remember who, but I was just talking about Miley Cyrus and Drew Barrymore and growing up like with on in the cameras and things, your life being magnetized. It's not easy. So I really related. I really enjoyed that conversation. If you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it, I take talk, you should probably check it out. They talk about some really, really good things. Um, but I thought that was an especially good conversation. Um, and if you get a chance to see that, get that too. Because again, like I said, growing up in the spotlight, a lot of children develop mental illnesses. They have mental breakdowns and things of that nature. And one of the really big ones, Britney Spears. Uh, Britney Spears. She's been through so much. And even growing up in the spotlight and us knowing and seeing Britney and knowing who she is, we still had no idea of all the things that she's actually been going through. And we see recently, with her conservatorship battle continuing in front of our eyes, after she gave that 20-minute, uh, after she gave her testimony, it just resonated in so many different levels, in so many different ways, with so many different people. And it's shocking to hear the severity of the situation, because we have only known so much up until this point. And it warranted the Free Britney hashtag back on social media. If you've seen it, you know what it's all about. Her testimony was just wow. It was I, I'm not the biggest fan of Britney. I love Britney. Don't get me wrong. But I was actually surprised. Yeah, like she has been through so much, and she, personally spoke to being forced to be on birth control and things of that nature. And she's worked really hard, like a lot of other celebrities, for income and for her lifestyle and things like that. And it's just not right in any way, shape, or form that her dad is still controlling her in this way. So, free Britney. I agree. I am way on board with that, and it's just kind of saddening to hear that someone is taking advantage so so much so by their own family. They care more about the money than the person, and that's sickening. So, if you didn't know, now you know. Britney, free Britney. That's what that's all about. Moving forward, I did actually get a chance to see, well, not see, but I watched the trailer. That's as far as I got. I've been very busy. I watched the trailer for the new movie In the Heights, which is a on-screen remake of the Broadway story West Side Story. From what I understand, it's very similar to West Side Story or adaptation of the West Side Story. So I've seen the trailer, and even in the trailer, I actually have this same criticism. But I see a lot of people have this criticism that there was not enough Afro Latino people involved in the casting of this movie. Um, it is supposed to be something based in a rural area, a diverse area. Excuse me, and I do think, even like I said, from the seeing just the trailer so far, I do think there was a lack of diversity there. I think they could have perhaps gotten a few more um, Hispanic or brown or black people to play these roles. And I get that the male lead is a well-known Hispanic actor. He's gorgeous. I can't think of his name right now. But I get that they did intentionally include a diverse crowd from what I'm hearing, but it just doesn't appear that there's enough, and that's been the criticism that I'm seeing along the line here with this remake. So if you've seen it, actually, I know I believe it was Tia Maxwell, the baker extraordinaire here in Providence. Also, shout out to Tia Maxwell. I just saw her last night, and she gave me two of her amazing little stickers with her emblems on them. And if you haven't yet, check out Tia's Making Bake. But anywho, I know that Tia sounded off a little bit on the Book of Faith about In the Heights as well, and I believe Graham as well. Yeah, not the same criticism, but criticisms nonetheless. But I will actually watch it before I unleash my full criticisms, of course, because there will be more to come. Um, there has also been a few challenges. I don't know if anyone was aware of this, but another thing that's actually been that another thing that's actually been a thing that shouldn't be a thing, if you ask me, was there were many challenges to try to repeal or get rid of Obamacare, and recently all of those challenges have been dismissed. No need to worry if you have Obamacare or your insurance functions through Obamacare, you're all good. They have been dismissed. I believe since the beginning of the Trump era presidency, they've been trying to get rid of Obamacare. So no worries until this point, up until this point, because again, they have all been dismissed. All the challenges to Obamacare. So that's good. No need to worry because the system that's been in place so far from Obamacare, I believe, has been working to an extent, and I'm not mad. If it's working, let it work. I think that was just something that was on Mr. Trump's list just to spite him. And last, one of the few things that happened locally that I was really happy about was that marijuana was legalized in Rhode Island. Woo-hoo. Yeah, we just talked about this on TV show, the legalization of marijuana and decriminalized as well. Um, but my question is, how do we move forward now? Again, it's a big one. I'm really excited for us going down this path. However, how do we move forward with people who have records for these things, who have been uh, criminalized because of petty drug charges? How do we move forward with that? Do we expunge records? And if we do, who do we speak to about expunging records? How does that move? How does that go? Because there are a lot of disproportionately black and brown people that have suffered from these petty drug charges, and we need to address it. It is a really huge issue, and now that we are going down this path of legalization and decriminalization, it's only fair. So I'm looking forward to seeing the other end of that token of the legalization of marijuana. But we are excited. It does take money out of criminals' hands, so to speak, or out of the black market and puts it into the economy. So we have that going back into our own economy. So that's how I feel about that. I'm really glad about it for the most part. And one of the last hot topics really, ties right in to today's topic of environmental injustice. I heard about this, and it just speaks again to a lot of different things, it speaks to our society, and it speaks to the lost Black wealth that has happened in this country and around the world, so to speak. Um, what I'm talking about is the recent bill, the American Rescue Plan, that was presented to minority and Black farmers. I believe it was $5 billion that was set aside, and I don't remember the breakdown of how that was. But part of it was to educate new people in farming and agriculture, which I think is an amazing way to use this funds. And it was kind of bundled. This bill was bundled into what was referred to as a coronavirus um, stimulus package, so to speak, for Black and minority farmers. And it was challenged by the white farmers. The bill has been passed regardless, but it was challenged by white farmers. And they said, what does this have to do with coronavirus? And why is it that it's only going to minority farmers? And to answer that question, before I even answer that question, the white farmers received funds already because prior to all of this, they had received funds that Black and brown farmers did not receive. So I don't understand their mishap here. However, the reason that they're not getting it is because Black and minority farmers have always been challenged and oppressed by this by the agriculture. Senator Lindsey Graham actually called this bill, this aid, reparations, and said there was no need for it, which is, kind of disheartening and very sad because Black farmers have been lobbying for Senator Lindsey Graham for some time now, especially in the areas where the farming is still a big deal. But minority farmers have been, they make up only 1.5% of all the farmers in the U.S. right now. That is because they're losing land at high rates. And discrimination in the agriculture and farming industry. It's unaddressed. It's not something that's talked about, but it's something that plays a major role in this economy that we have. Growing food is not something, and access to healthy food that has been grown is not something that is light. And we're going to get into that a little bit more later. But, this discrimination in the agriculture and farming industry is unaddressed, and it needs to be. And I'm really glad that this aid was given to them, the $5 billion to be dispersed, because already they started from a lower playing field. In the 20th century, in the turn of the 20th century, I believe, I don't remember the date, um, it was 1 million Black families that put blood, sweat, tears into their farmland in the US. Now that number is 50,000, I believe, just 50,000. And that again, because losing lands at high levels. Back when slavery was still a thing, and um, we were promised 40 acres and a mule. If that 40 acres and a mule would have happened, Black farmers would still be at somewhere closer to that million marker, and would still be, I believe that would level out to about $7 million or so now in land, and would make Black farmers on a level playing field and minority farmers as white farmers. But that did not happen. There was no promotion for Black farming, and there was no uh, passing of knowledge within the Black community and the minority community, because a lot of white farmers wanted to stay that way. Um, at least if you ask me. John Boyd Jr. actually called out Senator Lindsey Graham, and said he needed an apology for calling this aid reparations, and I agree. And John Boyd Jr. is the president and founder of the National Black Farmers Association, and so he's been one of the people that's been advocating for this and lobbying for this bill to pass. And it all goes back to the history, to Black history and Black wealth, and that has been erased and taken. A lot of slaves, again, that tended to these lands, when they were freed or told they were free, had nowhere else to go. There was no housing. And so they stayed on this farmland. They tended to this farmland, and they rented space on this farmland until, somewhere down the line, some people were able to purchase this land and from their previous owner. And again, it's just something that it has been overlooked, and it's sad that it's not been passed on as well. But I'm glad again that we're now drawing an eye to that, to the agricultural field, because we do need that, and we are. I'm overjoyed that Black farmers are being acknowledged now. Perhaps Black and minority farmers will increase because of this bill, or because of the focus that we have on this now. One of the things that just needs to be changed, and that speaks to a lot of environmental injustices that happen in this world, in this country. We can go on. People just need to know what's going on, and how injustice to our environment plays a bigger role than you think in our lives. And we talked about this on Tea with Taylor as well. Social justice. Social justice is an environmental issue as well. And I'm going to tell you how social justice is an environmental issue, because we're going to get into it. Don't you worry. And again, it is an injustice, the things that have been happening and the things that we do to this world that we live in. No injustice should stand. But I'll explain to you what exactly environmental injustice is and how it plays a role. Um, the fight against environmental injustice actually began around 1980, 1981, 1982, around that time. So it's something that's been going on for quite some time. But environmental injustice basically is the basis of where and how communities are segregated, um, based off of race, origin, and income. Um, Environmentally problematic facilities, if you look at development and infrastructure, have been for a very long time known to be located in areas where there was low income, or a lot of Black and brown people, and in those areas they are become less desirable because these things are being put there. Not like other neighborhoods in the same town, in the same city, where they have banks and grocery stores, and they're far away from pollution and transportation. Uh, a lot of disproportionately Black and brown neighborhoods and areas are segregated by highways and industrial sites and toxic waste and diesel ports that, eventually pollute the air and water in those communities. And in those communities, again, it becomes undesirable. And we have the segregation. And I even saw that someone said pollution is segregated. And it made sense because, again, if you're only building these areas, and this has been since 1982 that we've been addressing this, two presidents actually have had to sign bills into law to address this issue of pollution and environmental injustice and things like of that along those lines that affect, um, you know, inadequate. Then it becomes inadequate housing, and the infrastructure suffers because of it. And that all boils down to poor land usage and poor land use planning, something that we are now drawing attention to as well globally. President Biden's infrastructure plan and things like that that are actually drawing attention to these things that are super important to our way of living. And this system uh, eventually can get so bad, and I've heard different story. I've read different stories about it that globally, small island nations have been pleading that we do something about how we extract our resources. Um, in 50 years, most of the island communities could be underwater because of how we choose to uh, retrieve our resources. Um, and it forces a lot of people to deal with the consequences of what we have what we have forced upon them, like rising sea levels and air and land pollution and water pollution, when in fact these places have had nothing to do with it. They're just suffering the consequences of it, and the consequences of climate change, which is a really, 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 really big one. And so many different things have been happening because of climate change. Um, and then a lot of people in these small island nations have also began to leave their own land. And then where do you go when you are forced to leave your own land and your own community because of the environment is no longer sustainable? Then what? So that's where we're at. It could get to that point. And if you think 50 years is a long time, just think about it, take a second, because it's not that long. Um, and the way we're going, it could be expedited. So we have to again draw attention to how we extract our resources, and that's a really really big one. Paying attention to where we put these diesel forwards and how we dispose of toxic waste. And I believe that COVID actually exposed this problem just a little bit more for me, like it did for a lot of different things. Environmental injustice and playing a part in your environment is it's something that if you're conscious about can make a huge difference. And what we've had to deal with in a lot of these communities, like I said, with them being based on income and origin and race, what we've had to deal with is a lot of um, environmental contamination, which is common, which is a common occurrence, and that is making people sick in these areas. And then when something like COVID has come around, it draws it makes that a bigger deal because then you realize in those areas you also have um, a lack of access to good health care. And it's not something of your own doing, it's just because of where you're forced to live. And it's, again, a consequence of climate change, a consequence of environmental injustice, and consequence of being in that neighborhood that is a low income neighborhood and your children walking back and forth to school in these neighborhoods that are polluted or over over congested and polluted and contaminated. Environmental contamination happens. It is a common occurrence in a lot of different areas. So again, I think COVID exposed that just a little bit more. Um, Minorities disproportionately suffer from contaminations in their area and where they live. There are different things like metals in the harmful metals in the air and pesticides that come from different processes that are done. Um, but minorities are just again disproportionately suffer from these consequences. Um, every year, actually, I read 1.2 trillion gallons of stormwater and sewage and waste are dumped in the US. That's 1.2 trillion gallons that is just dumped and and not properly disposed of in this country. Such privilege to be able to do such a thing and to be killing our our to be killing our economy and our world with such carelessness. And unfortunately, the World Health Organization as well, something I read, estimates that climate change will cause an additional 250,000 deaths per year between the years 2030 and 2050. So again, that's 10 years from now that we start seeing the effects of climate change, that we start seeing the effect of these injustices, of these environmental injustices that we suffer through peacefully as a community, as you know, as Black and Brown people, as minorities. Um, Even the World Health Organization is drawing attention to this. They're saying by 2030, 2050, like that we're increasing the deaths. You can live in the same area, the same city, the same town as someone, and live on two different sides of that city. One that is again contaminated and filled with these polluting sites, and have a different death rate than someone who lives on the other side of that town or that city. And that blows my mind. Again, killing off people of a certain group disproportionately. If it's not one thing, it's another. It seems. In the U.S., as we are perceived as a wealthy neighborhood, a wealthy wealthy neighborhood, as we are perceived as a wealthy nation or a developed nation, we don't suffer the effects as directly as other nations do, based off of their lack of resources and their lack of ability to adapt. Um, in the U.S., we tend to think that these things are not happening, or we take it for granted because we don't see the effects as directly as other people around the U.S. do, and other developing nations, and other countries that aren't as wealthy as the U.S., so to speak. Just like COVID right now, and how that has still been spreading, and there's been so many different strands, and how there are different communities that are suffering worse than when COVID first started. And we think that just because in the U.S. things are better because of rapid immunization, which we are glad to have, but it's not over. It's still happening, and and even worse, other places are suffering. Other countries are suffering. Other not underdeveloped nations are suffering. So we have to be diligent about this. And their ability to adapt is something that they cannot adjust. So that's one of the main reasons these places are suffering. Um, Indigenous populations as well, or agricultural societies and economies, have limited options for adapting to climate change threats. So again, the ability to adapt comes into hand. And 40% of lakes, I believe it was that I read, yeah, yeah, 40% of lakes in the U.S. are just plain out too polluted to sustain life, or to sustain a healthy ecosystem. And that becomes a bigger problem when we start talking about global warming. Um, Again, indigenous population have little to no option when it comes down to the uh, to the climate change, to adjusting to things not being the way that they normally are, and that they need them to be in order to be an agricultural society. Um, Again, like not being able to sustain life and that ecosystem that plays a huge role in growing. Um, Global warming plays a huge role in that, and it is the consequence of over over civilization. Oh, human activity is the consequence. That's why we're facing this global warming problem. 2020 was the second warmest year on record. At the average global temperature had no doubtedly been rising, whether or not former uh, presidents want to acknowledge that or not. It has been rising. The global temperature has been rising, and I forget which number it was by. But again, 2020 was the second warmest year on record, with I believe 2018 being the first highest. Along with rising sea levels, like we talked about earlier, so a lot of island societies or um, smaller nations may be again underwater in less than in 30 to 40 years if we continue to derive our goods and things from the world the way we do. It just has to be another way. Um, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that was developed in 1988 has been an advocate for this as well, for acknowledging climate change and for educating people on what's actually happening in our society. But on the other hand, community nonprofits are extremely underfunded that would follow in this kind of footstep. Something that we actually really do need. Community nonprofits would help, and again, that's something that we can do to help. And signing up for local cleanup that will save animals and decrease land pollution, and sometimes even help with the air pollution. Um, and I know again to bring it back to COVID, unfortunately, and for when there were so many people staying home, there were so many less cars on the road. The air quality again was noticeably different. It was so much better. And it was scary to know that just in a few months that we would notice the air quality difference just from less driving. And if something like that could happen on a global scale, even just in the US, then we would be so much better off. I know that again in like that infrastructure plan that President Biden is pushing for, that electric cars is part of that, and we're moving in a really new direction with that, and trying to push forward with more electric cars being a thing. That could be something that is a really good option for us at this point as a nation. Do I want to drive an electric car? Not really, but will it help? Most definitely. So I think that's actually a really good step that we're moving in. And then again, we had in 2018, which I believe was the first highest warmest year on record. Um, 14 extreme weather events that resulted in more than $1 billion in damage. The average number of people after that that were exposed to heat waves increased by 125 million, y'all. The average number of people exposed to heat waves increased by 125 million. That's absolutely insane, and it's contributing. It's contributing, of course, to the global water crisis, and the drought in the U.S. right now, the dry spell in the U.S. that we're having. Yeah, as we all know, these heat waves we just passed through one of them in the middle, in the south here, where we had temperatures that were just unbearable and causing a lot of infrastructural problems. And again, contributing to the water crisis, which is a really, really, really big one. Um, Within 50 years, again, same marker point, we've seen many regions lose a third of the water, of their fresh water supply. And the US could possibly be preparing for a possible official water shortage declaration. Um, Again, in places like California and Colorado, they are actually policing, so to speak, how much water people use. Or I believe there was some sort of a bill being passed that you can't water your lawn at certain times, that you can only use a certain amount of water for things along the. And you guys let me know in the comments if you've heard about that. But I do know that there's something like that that was being in place in like places like California, because we are actually bracing for water shortages in the next 30, 40, 50 years. Because climate change, again, we have less snow that goes into those rivers. And like I said, there's a process that we use to distill fresh water. And then um, hotter temperatures are making the soil more parched than it usually is, which means things grow less or don't grow at all. Um, and then we have more evaporation as opposed to more water. So, the decreasing precipitation also is a problem because there's rising population. Again, people just, us being the problem. That seems to be the theme here. But 96 out of 204 freshwater basins in the US could be in trouble in 40 years. And that's a lot. 96 out of 204. And if that, again, doesn't seem too close enough for you, shortages also could occur in 83 of our freshwater basins by the end of 2021. So take that in. 83 out of the 204 that we have here in the US of our freshwater supply could be affected. So preserve water now. Do their part to preserve water. Another pollutant that is really big on my list is plastic. Do your part to use less plastic. And that's really one of the many things that I can offer as a solution for these many, many problems that we're having. Um, and again, with air contamination and things like that, our children are the ones that are affected more so by this. So we have to look at this for our future endeavor. Unfortunately, children make up 10% of the world's population, but 40% of them deal with the burden of air contamination. More than 3 million children under the age of 5 die yearly on a global scale from air pollution and pollution of different sorts and contamination. And then again, we go back to that loop of the lack of access to adequate health care. And then what group does that affect? It's a full circle, unfortunately. And that is what climate injustice, that is what environmental injustice is. It's that circle of events that happens from this climate change and from our environment and the way things have been set up structurally, infrastructure. So now that you know that, again, begin to sign up for local cleanups and things like that in your neighborhood that just can take that step forward in making this world just a little bit less polluted. Um, Air quality, bike more, walk more, use your car less. Um, that is a really big one, I think. Again, like I said, we noticed the air quality had changed when there were less vehicles on the road during COVID season, um, in the peak of that. And so if we can just take lessons from that, something that seems small can make a huge difference if we all decide to be cognizant and aware of the issues that we're facing with environmental injustice. And again, noting that infrastructure is a really big one in affecting the change that we're looking for with this kind of an issue. It's something that's really big and on a global scale. So we have to hope that we can come together with solutions for these kinds of things. But it's not something that will happen overnight. With that being all said, thank you guys again for coming today to listen to me talk. I hope you learned a little something. Um, again, uh, look for some sort of option within your community. Speak with your local elected officials about it. Make sure that there's something you can do to better your economy. If there's not only just one, if it's only just one tiny little thing like doing a local park cleanup or just one thing this year that you can do to say, yeah, I made my effort, then that is enough. But make sure you're actually making that. We only have one place to live. So far, we have not habitated or civilized the moon. We haven't quite gotten to Mars just yet. So take it from Mr. Neptune. You ready there? Take it from Mr. Neptune. We need to start making efforts now, and that's a group effort. That is a community effort. That's a team effort. So now you know. Remember those rainbow things. The more you know. Back in the day. But I'm going to leave you all, unfortunately, at this point, to enjoy the rest of your Friday evening. Looking forward to seeing you all at those Pride celebrations that I spoke about earlier in the episode. And I am going to always tell you to make sure to be good to yourselves. Make sure you're looking inward. Make sure you love yourselves. Um, love yourself enough for the both of them. And I am so grateful and thankful for you all following and keeping up on all the social medias. If you are looking for that, just search Taylor Neptune. Keeping up with All Things Progress channel, thank you so much um, for keeping up with the work we do. And yeah, that is all for today. And join me again next Friday at 4 o'clock, leaving the topic off for now because I love making you all wait, as you know. But thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your Friday.